Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining. We're going to be kicking things off here very shortly. And just a reminder on a few things right before we kick things off, that there is a little Q&A button on the bottom of your screen where you can post questions that we'll get to. We'll try to get to everyone's questions either at the end of the presentation or throughout. And also, just to let everyone know as you join, that if you go to the View Options button on the top of your screen, if you select side-by-side mode, you can also make sure that you can actually see all the speakers and panelists, even when they're not talking, if you'd like to see them as well. And so we'll be kicking things off here very shortly. And we'll be going through why it's important for HR professionals to be active on social media and virtually communicate. So I'm going to hand it off to our moderator first, Mary, who's Qnary's US president, and she can introduce our two really great panelists, and we can dive in. Thank you, Mary.
Great. Hello and welcome. Oops. Thank you for joining us for our Qnary webinar series, celebrating executive thought leadership in the enterprise. As Mark said, today's topic is why it's so important for human resource professionals to be active on social media now. We're delighted to have two fantastic guests join us, Matt Seiler, Managing Director and Executive in Residence of Reigns International, and Brian Mall, Head of Candidate Engagement at BKR Strategy Group. Matt and Brian, I'm going to give it over to you for a quick introduction.
Thanks, Mary. Thanks, Mark. Great to be here. Brian, good to see you again.
As well.
So yeah, I'm really happy to be a part of this conversation. I'm a former agency guy, so I've only been in the search space for a few months now, and I was a CEO a few times of various agencies and so on. And I wanted to shift out of agency and into media owner, and I found it was harder to do than I thought it was going to be, and I really needed an agent. So I decided to create that, a CAA for business people, if you will. And we'll talk more about what that is, but I joined Reigns in October, so I do executive search, talent management, and other cool stuff.
That's awesome. And Brian Mall, basically founder and chief candidate officer in terms of engagement. Basically what BKR is what we call marcruiting. So we use marketing intelligence to make recruiting more productive, and it just goes to show with Matt being from his background in recruiting, it's very much what we do is we actually engage. What I think HR and recruiting needs most is expertise from an advisory or consulting, almost build a team of teams that are usually marketers, content specialists, those that can really uncover the insights to make your message that much more powerful and effective and measurable. So we feel like it's an obscene unfair advantage to recruiting is to actually have the intelligence of who you're talking to, what they respond to, what's their journey, versus talking at someone about an opportunity to apply to something that usually doesn't go anywhere. So was really pumped about being invited to this conversation. Obviously, Qnary is one of my favorite companies doing some really interesting things that make people like me and Matt look good and sound good, but obviously the product would work. So, really excited to be here, but thanks for the invite.
Thank you, guys.
Yeah.
So today, we are in an extraordinary moment in history. We're all experiencing changes to our everyday personal and professional lives that we can never have imagined possible. Professionals are working remotely en masse, and they are relying on digital communication platforms more than ever to stay connected with their teams, colleagues, stakeholders, consumers. The importance and value of professionals and executives participating on digital channels like LinkedIn and Twitter is not new. In fact, it's something here at Qnary, as Brian nicely teed up, that we've built a business around. While for years the focus has been on brands building a digital presence, what we found that while this is important, having executives and leaders build digital presence, engage with targeted audiences, can have an even greater impact for their enterprise. Why? People want to engage with people. We don't actually want to talk to a brand, we want to talk to a human. We see this in the data as employees have 10 times more reach than brand or corporate channels. Employees trained to use social media to advocate on behalf of their enterprise. I found a lift in sales, which also makes sense as people trust people. And leaders' participation on these platforms matter the most. Not only are employees inspired by socially active leaders, but they mimic their behavior. Culture and behavior start at the top. This all helps to foster employee engagement and advocacy, which we know can be critical factors to produce top performing teams. And this is even more impactful today. In times of crisis, people look towards their leaders internally and externally. It's a time to showcase your strength, your authenticity, your struggles, your humor. It's a time when people are looking for reassurance that they and their companies are going to make it through okay. Social media is a great resource to showcase how your organization is thinking through these issues and coming up with innovative solutions, sharing what you've done for your employees, how your company is giving back, and how you're going to not only survive this, but be stronger on the other side. As such, executive teams are positioned to reach a more engaged audience and build more meaningful connections than brands are able to do. Social media is also a critical area where talent and potential recruits research your enterprise. An active, innovative, and engaged team is a huge plus in differentiating your organization from your competitors. So how do human resource professionals keep a remote team connected and engaged in today's new normal? How do you ensure excellent work during a global pandemic? There are a lot of distractions out there right now. How are you recruiting and hiring? How is this changing in this time, and how can social media be critical to this? And this is basically where my expertise just stops and Matt and Brian comes in. So without further ado, I'm going to jump into the questions for them. So it feels like our world changed overnight, because it did. How have your organizations had to adapt, pivot, or change during this time? Matt, let's start with you.
Sure. I feel like I missed a big opportunity to give a shout out to Qnary, and Brian did that so well. So I want to echo how awesome Qnary is and how great it's been working with you.
Thank
that
you so
being said, so it's been really interesting, and you'll hear from me throughout this conversation a kind of Pollyanna sort of view of things. And it's not that I think that this is all awesome, and it's not that I think that COVID has been a blessing in any way, except to say that our organization, as in Reigns itself, is communicating extraordinarily well. We do a lot more video conference than we ever did, which is certainly true of all of us out there in the world. But things that would have been done as a call often are done with video. Like we're finding a way to be together in a way that we didn't actually when we were just down the hall from each other. Mm-hmm. Oftentimes, if we have groups of people together, we get on the video to talk about that specific thing that we gathered around. And then people kind of like to hang around a little bit. You know, it's I think, been really great for the organization. We're in San Francisco, Chicago, DC, New York, Buenos Aires. And so we're not physically together a lot of the time. And now in a weird sort of way, we are physically together. You know, we're actually tighter as a group of people, I think, than we've been ever before. I on a separate, my wife is in the real estate business, and as real estate agents, they are meeting together as a group around properties, new initiatives, et cetera, more robustly than they ever did when it was a requirement for people to actually physically be there. So it's really tightening things up in a weird way.
Yeah. I'd agree with that. With my organization, we've naturally, it's fascinating in recruiting just how many relationships that you have that you've never actually had a face-to-face with, just because of email, phone. So all these channels, and if we think about, you know, why HR and recruiting should be more on social media, it's one channel of marketing, right? So to basically identify, you know, right out the gate, what are the channels that basically establish confidence that we all are going to basically actually be in this together. So there's some level of humility in empathy that we had to immediately go out to our clients and candidates, obviously, that were in process, as well as our contractors and our employees, was just, hey, here's the best practice for how we're going to use Slack, right? So a lot of firms just implement, you know, these things, and just naturally it's a false sense of security. I know my team, as well as our clients, we really wanted to establish to where people could feel comfortable that there's a foundation, first and foremost, in terms of where to communicate, why it's important to use certain tools a certain way, just so we don't, miscommunicate in terms of really the whole optics was just to provide everyone that we have a foundation that a lot of us have been using, but not using to the best of its ability. And I think that was something that was really helpful to basically get everyone confidence in our capability to withstand the ambiguity, if you will. Yeah. And so that's probably first and foremost.
Thank you. Absolutely. So we've had, it's kind of like the rug was pulled out from under us. And now we have about a month or so where we've been able to kind of come to terms with this new reality. How are you consciously shifting your working practices to fit into today's landscape? What is your organization thinking about doing differently moving forward?
We have a press release going out today, actually, and you may have seen it. I know the Qnary people did, in that they were instrumental in putting it there on LinkedIn a couple of days ago. So part of the reason why, as I said in the intro, that I came to Reigns was to look at executive search in a very different sort of way and challenge some of the status quo. And there were two B2C elements of that. They're broadly under personal brand management, helping people identify what that thing is that they really have to offer organization, what difference they can make for organizations that are looking to have differences made. And then we also manage people's career on a go-forward basis. We were planning on launching the marketplace next month, and then this all happened. And what that made us do was pull it up some. It's a little bit more manual today than it will be, not a little bit, it's a lot more manual today than it will be in a couple of weeks. But we just have so many people that are in need, both individuals looking for opportunities and organizations looking for people to solve really critical and current need. So if you look at what the market looks like, on one side, you've got organizations that are experiencing extraordinary growth. Anybody that's in video conferencing, as we've already said, delivery, a lot of technology, content, alcohol, food service, etc. They're having major spikes, and it's difficult for them to keep up with that given how their organization is currently structured. And on the other side of that are people that are experiencing a spike in a different sort of way, more like a football spike, and that is, QSR, airline, travel, etc. And they're in desperate need of people who can help with restructure and so on. Mm-hmm. And what you don't want to be is in a situation where you have to have a very protracted search, very expensive, to help people with needs that may not actually go on more than the next few months. So we launched the marketplace. The response has been extraordinary. It's across 6 verticals, a number of different levels, all vetted by Reigns to ensure that they're top talent. So that's something that we pulled forward for this moment, but of course is one of the now foundational pieces of what Reigns is.
That's awesome. Yeah, I'm seeing it everywhere, is that those that were participating in the conversation of digital transformation, which obviously that marketplace that you're talking about, Matt, is phenomenal. It kind of expedites the need to basically launch it, to get people to kind of start using it. And in HR terms, just because that's where I came from, HR and recruiting it's one thing to recruit, it's another thing to onboard.
Yeah.
And your recruiting brand actually is defined by the way in which you onboard, and kind of going back to basically establishing a foundation for people to scale their confidence in their own capability. It actually created our opportunity to actually really prioritize our narrative for not just what clients that we currently have, but was actually a program that we have called Brand Ambassadors, which is actually a majority of our clients. We actually bring in teams of teams, so contractors that have been part of that participation phase of like, okay, we know we need to be relevant for today's business, which is your current organization, which I know everyone in HR and CFOs especially is like, well, if we invest in that foundation and in terms of training and development, and they leave, right? But what happens if they stay, right? Remember the whole thing? It's fascinating. Now they're really interested in investing in onboarding not only their own employees to programs that basically go, okay, this is now our new normal. These are our new priorities in terms of projects, because now they're being asked to really perform more so than just participate in what I'm thinking is and seeing as a digital transformation. So, platforms, programs, our brand ambassador program is a prime example of really showing that, let's get your internal organization set up properly to communicate to all these teams in a relevant way, because not everyone's doing the same thing, but they're all feeling the same pressures of, am I valuable? What's next? Because they're going there. One of the things I've noticed is organizations that have been participating in digital transformation, but not really performing, just because they, are hesitant. Now they're being forced to perform. We're seeing that most organizations that we've worked with are there mentally, but now you actually apply the people in the operations, and more times than not, they need actually more marketing and more technology to be able to actually perform in this environment. And so I think obviously what Reigns is doing is genius, because there's never a right time to launch something that's going to really transform the industry, which I think you guys are poised to do that. But how do you onboard them to that? And I think it's just concepts in terms of, what is your business needing to do to not just survive, but to thrive? So certain programs that we provide really allow for just the stuff that everyone thinks everyone knows how to do, but to onboard it, like, again, to Slack. What is the best working hours to basically engage a contracting firm to actually, move some initiatives forward? We get to be a thought partner in terms of the onboarding part. Because I don't know about you guys, but how many times have you shown up to an organization after being hired and the onboarding is like, here's your computer. That's it. Right? I won't mention any names, but I work in a lot of really awesome brands that are like, we don't even know where the bathroom is, but hey, can you get this done by tomorrow? Thanks. All right, great. So.
Awesome. That's great. So obviously, to your points, virtual communication is critical. We've completely digitally transformed from external platforms like LinkedIn to internal platforms like Slack. Brian, to your point, one thing I think that people are really being mindful of right now is getting the voice and tone right in this time of crisis. As it's just as important for internal employees who are under such tremendous stress as it is for an external audience. Can you speak a little bit more about why virtual communication tools are so important for today's internal teams in particular, and how you're finding it keeping a remote team connected, engaged, and producing excellent work in a, really trying time?
You want to go first this time, Brian?
Sure. Yeah, we'll mix it up. I think anonymous surveying capabilities via social media is really, really valuable, because not everyone, I think the stuff that I've been reading just in terms of even college students that are now going home, like they felt like everyone was on an even playing field in terms of being able to actually do their work at home. But, we know that's now not true. I mean, obviously we know that's not true anyways. So I think the ability to really understand collectively what people are needing in terms of either insights. So I've seen some really great examples of, like, when it comes to COVID-19, like, here's where you can go, like useful direction, versus just talking. It's kind of like noise for noise sake. I think the surveying piece, which is obviously a marketing piece that's used in social media quite a bit, I think is so valuable. But that anonymous in terms of what your population actually needs is extremely valuable, because that way you're not exposing yourself as saying, hey, look, like I was laughing with my wife this morning, like I should put out all these advertorials about, how to actually book an appointment for surgery that's elective during a pandemic. Because there's people that need to do that, myself included. We had to do that when this first started breaking out, and it wasn't elective surgery, it was necessary. So like there's things where it's like, it really, it's niche, but the more you can actually get a collective understanding of where, what's valuable to my audience versus saying, hey, here's tips in terms of how you can use Zoom, right? That might be like, thanks. I need kind of know, like, what do I do if you guys are, going to shut down? Where do I go for what? And so it's just being very real versus, too corporate, I think.
Yeah, you brought up a really interesting point. I'm going to come back and add to that. The first, though, in how critical the virtual communication has been is evidence the video conference I was on right before I joined you guys. There were a half a dozen people on from different markets, and we had a worksheet that we were all working off of. I don't know that could have happened previously. Like, we six would not have gotten together around that thing if we were dependent upon doing that in an office. It has so quickly become a very organic way in which we work. And we're now just taking it for granted. It's amazing how adaptable human beings are, that it isn't weird anymore that we're doing this webinar without us, you know, being on a stage together. Like, this is perfectly natural. And to Brian's point, there are numbers of things that we have to do in order to get people more comfortable with it. You know, there's this kind of weird thing where you see that we're nodding when the other is talking, but not really. You know, that how you move and how you communicate and so on is a thing that we're all needing to adopt better to. But to add to, Brian, what you said, I think that it's so critically important in the use of all of our communications, be they digital or other, to ensure that you actually have something of value to impart. And what I think you saw a lot of people do at the beginning of COVID was to ambulance chase, was to show their own fears and anxieties by feeling as though if they weren't participating in the conversation that they were somehow going to be left out. Mm. And man, oh man, did you see a lot of brands fall flat on that. The numbers of borrowed interest advertisements digitally and or on television, et cetera, like, oh my God, I'd so much rather you had said nothing than to have said that wrong thing. Mm-hmm. So I think that action is a really critical part of it. And as I say, that's always been the case, but it's even more critical that when you get people together, when you're communicating, ensure that there's a real value behind it, or don't say anything.
Yep. No, I couldn't agree more.
Yeah, that is a really important point. Switching gears a little bit. So, you know, social media has been used as a, you know, pretty reliable tool for recruitment prior to all this, with posting, you know, job messages and things like that. But also be able to position your organization and your organization's leaders as inspirational and motivational kind of beacons that talent would be drawn to and would want to work for. That said, you know, everything flipped upside down. How do you see the process of recruitment changing in the wake of COVID-19? What should we be thinking about and considering when we are trying to recruit in such uncertain times? And, you know, Matt, to your point, there are some industries that are, you know, doing, you know, really well right now. Zoom's the example you always use, but for example, it just the challenge of recruiting talent in such an uncertain time, where do people begin?
Yeah, I think that, where do they begin? I think the end is the hard part. So to what Brian said before, we already do a lot of this. You know, we're always on the phone. We're already doing a lot of video conferencing. There's a lot of communications often that happen with candidates before you actually do the face-to-face. And so I think that we were habituated to the early part of the process. The thing that I think is a real challenge that each of us is working through, and I'd love to hear from other people that are listening in how they're managing this, it's at the end of the process when it's really hard. You know, the idea that you could actually bring somebody into the organization that you didn't actually meet along the way. You know, we're still kind of at the point, at least in our not distant memory, of shaking a hand before, you know, you consummate a deal or as you consummate that deal. So the notion of somebody coming into your organization that you did not actually meet other than digitally is something that I think we're all still working through. And to the point of the onboarding, you know, a part of that was, here's your computer and there's the bathroom. You have numbers of people that are showing up now for work that is not actually showing up for work. They are shifting what they were doing in their home office from what they've been doing before to what they're now doing. So all of those, I think, are real opportunities for us to ensure that we are, again, reaching out with really concrete, tangible things that matter, and maybe adding some other layers into the recruitment process. It probably takes, you know, a couple more interactions between candidate and hiring organization to ensure that we really do feel good enough about each other without meeting or knowing that we may not physically meet for a while.
Yeah. I'd agree with that. I think what's fascinating about the parallels, you know, because when we work with an organization, you have your revenue side and your non-revenue side usually, right? So it's operational, it's technical, it's sales, it's marketing. So it's like the sizzle and the substance. So we kind of look at it that way. And when you think about bringing in a recruiting program and systems and tools, technology and product recruiting is fascinating because they've been on this wavelength for a while now, which is if you're not providing transparency in terms of what they're getting into, efficiency, and then respect, then you are actually exponentially sending out a message to everyone that is connected online that you are not being transparent, which means you're hiding something. You're not being efficient, which means you're not organized, right? And then you're not being respectful, which is basically what most people in recruiting are experiencing more now than ever, because there's a level of what is the transparency that you provide. Hey, here's where we're at with COVID-19. This is what our policies are, right? This is how we're thinking of you already. And this is what position we know we're going to hire. Because I think a lot of people right now, I mean, naturally, I'm not being critical, are basically pipelining. And I have the saying from my first day of recruiting, I heard from my mentor, which is pipelines are like produce, they rot. And so if they're rotting online, right? So I think this is going to be affecting your ability of like really being thoughtful to what Matt's saying, is have something to say that's transparent in terms of what the process is and what you're actually hiring for and what type of role it is. Because just getting a bunch of people, it's very similar to the data conversation that's old school. Is like, we've got all this data, we've got all these applicants, right? And well, the problem with that is, what are they quality for where you're at in your stage of what you're recruiting for? And so the ability to basically leverage what's been working for real productive and very valuable technical recruiting brands, right, that are actually building disruptional tools. These are smart kids, they ask smart questions, right? And so now they're able to really do some things that basically could hurt your brand if you don't have that transparency. Efficiency is everything. But most importantly, I think online, when you think about social media, is that if you start thinking about recruiting, is 99% of the people you don't convert, but you're spending time and money and naturally their experience. So 99% of the people is now who you should be worrying about, because they're not converting, which means you're wasting their time, which means, so it just is, it's a bit of a mind melt. But I think really being along the lines of what's made successful brands, which is word of mouth, is that transparency of what you're recruiting for and what they can expect. To Matt's point, is like, we're going to slow things down because we can be way too efficient in terms of getting to that situation that everyone hates, which is, thanks for trying out for the past 3 weeks and no information back. Here's a key message, right?
Well, and not for nothing, whether we would have chosen this busting up of the status quo that is a lot of executive search or not, think about what's gone on around us. Everything's gone fractional. Everything has become digital. E-Trade, eBay, Airbnb, Rent the Runway, Uber, etc. Like, it's really time that we embrace just how much opportunity there is around digital in the recruitment process. And again, not to continually harp upon the marketplace, but we don't actually have to have any face-to-face with anybody in that marketplace on either side of it. All of the job of distilling people down to the word or phrase that best describes them, the development of a logo, the recruitment from the hiring company, all of that is done digitally.
Mm-hmm.
So thank you for that. Last question, the big one. What is permanent and what is temporary? When Matt and I were talking before this webinar, he was saying we've all kind of been thrusted in this great social experiment. And, hopefully we're going to start slowly coming out of it at some point. My colleague and I have been asking ourselves, why are we paying Manhattan rent on our office when we realize that all of our employees can actually work remotely? But then on the other side of it, I deeply miss my colleagues and being physically together. What do you think is going to be permanent of these changes when we're able to go back and kind of build back our professional lives, and what is temporary? I'm very curious.
Ryan, you want to go first?
Very, very polite. I appreciate it. Yeah. I think the things that are temporary is how we feel right now, right, about the situation, which is, ignorance creates anxiety, right? So not knowing. So that allows to kind of connect the next point is, it's really what's going to be permanent is how you make people feel. So again, it's that confidence whenever there's not, one of the things that I'm really excited about, and will be my own plug, is we have a wine lifestyle community that we've situated and promoted on behalf of our clients to actually send something that's intellectually stimulating, as well as they're drinking on the job, right? Because there's happy hours, but it's really meant to how do you make your employees and your customers feel at this point? Because the thing that's really, especially in certain markets, New York and San Francisco, where we're doing this right now, is the fun part is they go to work because they're getting paid to learn. So to invest in their intellectual horsepower, to actually send them something that can be shipped, right? To actually bring them on to we have this wine tasting and uncorking, and we bring in and it's formal, but it's informal, and it's not a happy hour. It's actually, you're investing in how, what makes them excited about coming to work is their opportunity to learn something of value. But it's our job in HR, I think, is to basically really invest in programs that really invest in their intelligence and making them feel confident and making them learn something, versus we're just waiting, right? So I think what's temporary is how we feel, and what is permanent is how you make your audience feel. And so there's programs that I'm really excited about that have nothing to do with winning more business necessarily, because you don't know. It's really about establishing those relationships. So how can we make you feel a certain way? I think more than anything, everyone needs to feel invested in. And that's where I feel like these programs are crucial, as well as it's about creating confidence and sparking curiosity. Because if we are stuck in our rooms for a while, we're going to really rely on their confidence to be curious in terms of solving for themselves as well as for clients. So
it's so interesting. I think about, I was an assistant account executive on the Procter & Gamble business, specifically Charmin bathroom tissue and Pampers disposable diapers when I first got into this business 132 years ago. And as an intelligently naive person, I looked at the amount of spend that went on promotion with Procter & Gamble, Colgate-Palmolive, and Kimberly-Clark, for example, and thought, man, if we all just stop this, if we all just agreed to knock this out, that's a tremendous amount of money that we're spending that we don't need to be spending. Of course, you can't do that, and there's collusion, and that as soon as you stop spending, the other ones take your place. But I feel like there's a lot of that going on right now. We've done a lot of things because we'd always done them that way. We go to a lot of events. Man, oh man, are the marketing community, senior level people, and the sales people that follow them, agency people, et cetera, really busy from the beginning of January through the end of March, because we're just going from place to place. I don't know how much we need to do that. And now that we can't do it, I think we're pausing and going, maybe I don't have to be traveling absolutely all the time. I look at the upfronts, again, for those people that know the media, the upfronts are a stupid idea that should have been eliminated decades ago, but it's how things always were done. Well, guess what? They got canceled. They won't come back. There's numbers of things that we've just been habituated into doing. I think that travel in general is that. We have always felt the need to just go where that person is. And that masks the fact that a lot of people aren't really all that busy, and so they had time to do all of that stuff. I think we're now able to quantify busyness a lot better. We're extraordinarily efficient. We don't have commuter time right now. We get from wherever, the large commute from our kitchen to our living room where the work gets done. But I think that we're going to really be much more aware of efficiency and effectiveness. I think we'll travel a lot less. I think a lot of events will go away. And I think that video conferencing is going to become a real staple in how we communicate. It's, as you said, Mary, at the start, this is a mass social experiment that we wouldn't have chosen. But I think that there were a lot of companies that questioned how much people would do if they were working from home. And now we're seeing that the answer is they would do a lot. Yeah. It's good. And so that's going to impact cities. That's going to impact suburbia and rural areas. It'll shift the financial dynamics. It'll shift the political boundaries. A lot will change.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Because it should.
Thank you. And we have a few questions from the audience. And as a reminder, any questions that you have, just write them into the comment box, and we're happy to take them. Well, not me, but Matt and Brian are. Mark, do you want to tee those up?
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, we have some really good questions. First question we can go with from Rakesh is, how will social media help the people who have been laid off due to COVID-19?
A number of ways. I think that what people who have been laid off need to know is everything. They need to know how long this is going to be. They need to know that there are opportunities. They need to know that they're not alone in this. They need to know as much as they possibly can about when vaccines will happen, when people who are proven to be immune can get back into. So I think that social media is just brilliant for communicating things that communities can communicate much better than, say, presidents of the United States, just as an example. And so a lot of that is sharing, learning, alleviating concern, but also, this will sound like it's a third plug for the marketplace, because it is a third plug for the marketplace, but they will also learn through digital media and social and so on that there are opportunities. And the press is very much biased to bad news. And there is a lot of good news. There are a lot of opportunities for people. And I think that the more we can communicate, share when we hear where there are opportunities, help people who may not be aware that, anything delivered or video conference is on fire and where there might be opportunities there. So I think it's really kind of a community's job to help the individuals of that community, and social media is brilliant for that.
Yeah. One thing that goes back to when I actually used to work for Matt Seiler, before he even knew who I was, that one of the things that was most successful from a recruiting standpoint was actually advertising to an audience the size of our training and development budget. Remember back in the day, the McCann universities, I think a lot of organizations have tremendous content. I've seen some of them actually promote this from an agnostic, not just for their employees, but there's so many experts and expertise that goes into designing those programs, that learning and development to the wider population, given your location, your industry, that makes, I think, not only investing in your current employees, in terms of opportunities for them to learn versus just earn, right? Because that's how, if you do have to part ways, or if they part ways, you have that, not only that, I think digital karma, right? But I think that's something that for those that are laid off, you should be looking for those that are wanting to be a place of education, that have the programs that are promoting it. I think that's an amazing way for HR teams to basically actually use social media to where you are seen in a light that is in your area of strength, right? You're supposed to be the one to basically recommend training and development for someone. Hey, look, in a situation where I'm going to be let go because the work's coming to an end, or it's kind of like musical chairs. The best thing you can do to actually provide someone is, hey, here's something that you can onboard to that's going to make you valuable to us in the future, as well as the marketplace now, which is education. I think it's overcompensating, in my opinion, of everyone basically saying, here's a list, for you to basically follow in terms of COVID-19. I think I would almost prefer experts in science provide that list versus HR, because at the end of the day, you are responsible for the information you put out there. And if you're just, stealing from other ones that aren't necessarily proven, right? You could potentially be in a situation where you've undermined your credibility, which I think HR right now, especially recruiting, has a opportunity to really be a source of education. So.
Great. Mark, any other questions?
Yes. So another question, is there anything in particular that you feel will be temporary that you would like to be permanent, or vice versa?
Yeah, that's a great question. None of us knows this. And from a pure economics perspective, I think there's a lot of people that are hoping that this is a deep V, and that we immediately spring back, and that the economy comes right back with it, and that we're all right back on planes, right back on trains, right back in restaurants, and so on and so forth. And obviously there are strong economic reasons to hope that that is the case. But I fear that if we do that, we will have missed the moment. And this is a potentially contentious thing to say, but I don't think that the near economic collapse of 2008 and 9 did enough. It didn't change us. We really transferred the personal risk over to corporate risk. So societally, we didn't change enough. And this is a moment. We're really connected. We are, on the one hand, we're more caring than we've ever been. On the other hand, we're terrified of anybody that we pass that might somehow kill us.
Yeah.
But I think that there's a connectedness that I really hope sticks around. I think that there's a personal wellness thing that also really, I pray, sticks around. I think too much times we're evaluated based on how busy we are. And busy isn't an outcome. And I think that that's a lot of what capitalism is based on is, not what did you make, but how busy were you? And so I really hope we are much more thoughtful. I hope we're much more connected. I hope we don't just run back into the rat race and try to out busy each other.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think on my side, it's being much more clear about the near and midterm versus the vision for, right? So I'm seeing a lot of people, again, I think you're naturally using tools as a society to basically measure what we're, what like to your point, the V, like, okay, what does that look like? Does that mean I get, there's no one actually saying in the next 30 days, except for like when we're going to be relieved of going outside and whatnot, it's setting goals that basically, again, reestablish the confidence to face whatever letter this is going to be, right? I think self-sustaining pieces, it's the things that basically give people a lot more tangible, real world, where can I get paid, right? But, I think the gig economy is one that is really, really, unfortunately, we only think of like people that deliver pizzas and drive, an Uber. There is a tremendous amount of value in people that are even on this, webinar that no one is actually looking at saying, we can actually, during this period, build a bridge for you to where you can get paid to be extremely valuable when this thing pops back open again versus like in perpetuity. So the in perpetuity kind of conversations, I'm always like, okay, well, how can we get people paid and in a position of value in the next 6 months, right? Versus how can we survive? I think the survival mentality is there's plenty of that conversation. It's more about how can you thrive in increments that are guaranteed, that where you have a backing. So that is your community. What Matt's talking about is like, we're more connected. How can we be connected with purpose and productivity? Because I don't think this is the end. I think this is just the beginning of us basically actually really understanding how much you need a buoy system. You need a collective group that is not too big, but are all basically feeding you intellectually, financially, spiritually, mentally. And I think those that have that are going to be able to buoy and actually see opportunities to keep on doing that. So that's, hopefully that kind of answers the question, but I feel like productive, real-time, purposeful kind of direction for people versus, a lot of what's been done before is no longer going to be relevant. I mean, I'm just looking at, universities and schooling, how many people are basically paying for things that, like, to your point about the office, why am I paying all this tuition? Is this the stuff that's going to get me an internship, paid internship? So I'm thinking about people's livelihoods so that they can actually, bounce back in a way that they're not too terribly scarred, because I think that's something that no one's really addressing, especially in search.
Yes, thank you so much. That's great. And somehow we have run out of time, but Matt and Brian, thank you so much. And thank you also to our audience for joining us. As a reminder, you will receive a recording of this webinar, so you can just watch it all day long. And we'll also follow up with a complimentary online presence analysis and recommendation from Qnary, where we will analyze your digital presence and provide recommendations of what we would recommend for a really strong and robust presence for you and your enterprise. So more to come from Mark there. Again, a huge thanks to Matt and Brian for your time. This was incredibly interesting. And thank you for everyone who joined us.
Thank you all. Much appreciated. Thanks, Mary Mark. Bye,
Thanks
Brian.
so much.